Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. So last night I finished up my run through the Grandmaster's Gauntlet. This was actually the second time that I've been through the Gauntlet. First time, of course, was last year when the content originally came out. Wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about my strategies and my team planning, and then go through fight by fight and talk about what worked and what didn't work. Alright, so on screen is the team that I ended up going with, and one of my goals for this run was to use a completely different team than I had used last year. So last year I relied heavily on a rank 3 Corvus Glaive with Suicides for that quick and easy burst damage, also used Quake for quite a few fights, and then brought along Magneto, Archangel, and Ghost. I'm really out of practice with Quake, so I really wanted to avoid using her again, but I think more importantly for me, I really wanted to kind of lean on champions that I play more these days, rather than break out some old 5-star champions. So APOC here is a rank 4, Sig level doesn't really matter. Herc, rank 3, Sig 200. Omega Sentinel, rank 4, Sig 200. Really happy to finally be able to break her out into some meaningful content, and she absolutely crushed the fights that I used her for, as we'll talk about in a few minutes. Spider-Man 2099, a very critical part of this team. If you can fit Spider-Man 2099 on your team, you should absolutely bring him. He's totally worth it. Last but certainly not least, rank 4 Void at Sig 200. Alright, so now I want to go through each fight individually, talk about who I went in with, what strategies I used, and first up is this Dr. Doom here. So this fight was a solo with Apocalypse. It took me maybe 8 or 10 restarts or so to finally get the solo. There is really no need to use items on this fight. Since the content has no energy cost, you can just keep restarting until you get the solo. And as long as you can reliably dex Doom's special attacks, you should be perfectly fine here. The only other thing you have to worry about is Bubble Shield, so when you get to 10 stacks of it, just be aware that the next attack is going to be a guaranteed unblockable. Doom has really strong block penetration, so if you let Bubble Shield get out of control, you're going to be taking some pretty nasty block damage. So very important to get full dexes on Doom special attacks, punish them to avoid having to rely on parry and trigger too many stacks of Bubble Shield. Okay, next up is Terrax. Terrax, one of the more challenging fights to plan for in this content. I actually had a few other variations of my team where I had either Sorcerer Supreme or Namor on the team just to take this fight. And although both can definitely get the solo, in the end I kind of felt like they weren't going to be useful enough on other fights to kind of justify a spot on the team. So this ended up being one revive with Hercules, probably should have been a solo. Terrax didn't want to cooperate with intercepts, and in this fight when he doesn't play into you, you pretty much have no chance. Build up your strength as quickly as possible. I was doing a lot of like 2 lights and then backdraft into a light attack intercept until I was built up all the way to 12. Overall, pretty pleased with only one revive on this fight, to be honest. Okay, third fight is OG Vision. Now, I had originally planned to use Void for this fight and just reverse the Synthesis power gain, but in practice, Synthesis rarely seemed to trigger when I had both Fear the Void and 2 Petrifies up. So eventually I just got stuck. I did about 25% with Void anyway, so it wasn't like a total loss. What I should have done is just go in with Hercules in the first place, because it would have absolutely been a solo with Herc. So with Herc, you want to use your special 3 to push Vision to his special 3. This is going to do 2 things for you. The first thing is that it's going to give you a nice power gain buff after the fact. That'll bring you up to a bar of power after your special 3. But more importantly, you're going to get an indestructible buff. And as long as Vision throws his special 3 while you're indestructible, it's not going to kill you even with the Aspect of Death node active. So you'll already be at a bar of power, ready to repeat the cycle over and over again. So no revives on this fight, but Void did take an L, but that's going to happen sometimes. Okay, next up is MODOK. This was an easy solo with Apocalypse. Just stick to your parry heavy, use your special 3 when you have it. APOC is going to get that disorient immunity, so your parries are always going to land. I would say don't bother trying to use your special 1 or special 2 in this fight, because even with the big 70% concussion, there's always going to be a chance that MODOK is going to block it, and then you're going to get wrecked. Just stay patient, let the bleeds tick him down, make sure that you have enough space to dodge that SP1. That can be a little tricky, and you'll be fine. Okay, last fight in the first section is Spider-Ham. So this is honestly one of the worst fights in the content, just because like his AI profile is all over the place. He has the defensive node on him, but he was frequently hitting into my block 4 or 5 times. It was just crazy. I went in with Hercules first, did like 10%, and then used a team revive and did the other 90% in one go with APOC. So 1 revive total, really happy with that. With APOC, it's going to be a very long fight. I think it took me about 17 minutes or so, but APOC also very safe for this fight too. You're going to be healing up big time from the taunt and the Porker Popper debuffs. And then once you have your evade counter built up, you can safely hit into his block to create distance for yourself too. Similar to the last fight with MODOK, just stay patient. Don't worry about blocking a special 2 from Spider-Ham here and there, because again, you'll be healing up pretty frequently. And I actually ended up finishing this fight with a full yellow bar, so that was pretty nice. Okay, on to the second section. First up here is this Weapon X. So I initially went into this fight with Void, and I think this was just me wanting to use Void because I like using Void, right? So I only did like 4%, and then like an intercept didn't work or something, and I died. So I ended up paying the price a bit for my hubris. But after that, I did what I should have done in the first place, which was use Omega Sentinel, who is a far better counter to this fight than Void is. Omega Sentinel absolutely cleaned house with this Weapon X. So my strategy here was to activate the heal block mode at the start with her pre-fight, and then avoid using heavies so that I wouldn't accidentally switch myself out of it. You do have to intercept a lot because he's unblockable for a good portion of this fight. So I was trying to weave in like light ending combos whenever I could just to keep the debuffs paused. The plasma damage in this fight is just so good. And, you know, the near full uptime of heal block made this fight a ton of fun to do with Omega Sentinel. I'm still kind of annoyed with myself that I went in with Void first, because this absolutely would have been a solo with Omega Sentinel otherwise. Next up, it was Thing. This was also a solo with Apocalypse. So strategy here, SP2, SP1, and then an SP3 to lock everything in. Between the concussion and your heavy attacks, the rock stacks are going to be pretty much on a tight lockdown. I think only like once or twice maybe he actually got to 15 and required me to bait out a special attack. Not much to say other than that. If you can handle his rock stacks, you know, Thing fight is pretty easy overall. Okay, next fight was Korg. This one got a little bit messy. So APOC is the play here because he counters Korg's debuff shrugging, and I'd already built up the evade counter on Ham, so Mixmaster wouldn't be a problem either. Strategy is just to parry and use 4 lights to remove the rock stacks without taking Thorns damage. Use your specials when you can, of course, to apply the debuffs. So this fight, it actually ended up costing me 4 revives because I continued to make the mistake of trying to refresh the debuffs with my heavy attack while Korg had rock stacks up, and as a result, I was just taking stupid amounts of Thorns damage. If I did this fight again, I would try not to worry about keeping the debuffs active. If they fall off, just reapply them with another special and keep going. It's more important in this fight to preserve your health than it is to keep the debuffs up, especially because of that Gauss Warp node, which is going to ratchet up the block damage up to like 11, and you have no way of stopping it because Korg is shock immune. Similar to other fights here, stay patient, work on making sure that your parries stick, get those rock stacks down, and you'll eventually just outlast Korg. Okay, moving on. Next fight was Dragon Man. This was another easy solo with Void. So you're at the mercy of RNG for like a brief period at the start of the fight. But once Void gets those petrified debuffs applied, he turns off and then of course eventually reverses the power charge mechanic that Dragon Man has. So the only real concern here is aspect of evolution. So if Dragon Man's combat power rate becomes an issue later in the fight, and it might if you're not using a rank 4 Void like me, not everybody has a rank 4 Void, right? You're going to have to just slow the fight down and rely more on the degen for your damage and let the power gain reverse itself from the petrified debuffs. You can also keep your health topped off by blocking at least one hit of the special one while Dragon Man has his power charge active, so that's nice. That'll give you a nice lengthy non-damaging debuff. Void overall, just a tremendous counter to this fight. He really makes it simple. Finally, in section 2 we have Black Panther. This was 1 revive with APOC. Super annoying fight. He's going to start the fight unblockable, so you have to be aware of that. Other than that, your first goal in this fight with APOC is to get your concussion applied as quickly as possible, and this is going to help you turn off Footloose, which is probably the most annoying part of this fight. With Footloose, the unstoppable and evade buffs that he will get from it, they are two separate triggers, so you may find that the concussion will turn off one and not the other. So like on my run a few times, like it turned off the evade buff, but not the unstoppable. And I was getting a little annoyed because I already had APOC ramped up to counter evade, but obviously I had no counter for unstoppable. So at those points, I just had to wait it out. Remember that APOC is stun immune while attacking, so you can safely hit into Black Panther's block to stun him, and it will not be reflected back to you. Other than that, the worst part of this fight is getting yourself backed into the corner while he's both unstoppable and unblockable. So again, try your best to hit into his block to create enough space for yourself whenever possible. The kind of caveat with doing that is hitting into his block is going to grant him armor up buffs, which is going to cause him to go unblockable. So you really have to be on point with your intercepts in order to get this fight down. Okay, Section 3, first up, Nightcrawler. This was another solo with APOC. There is absolutely nothing going on with this fight other than the evade, and by now you should definitely have that handled with Apocalypse, so it's really just a standard Nightcrawler fight with a lot of health. Nothing else happening here. So similarly to Nightcrawler, the next fight is Spider-Gwen. A lot of evade here, with the added bonus that you can't hit Spider-Gwen at all while she's stunned, or she's going to reflect that damage back to you from the One Eye Open node. And at some point in this fight, I actually forgot that this node was active and going to apply that damage back even when the stun shield from Window of Opportunity was down. This mistake ended up costing me a revive. So best way to play this fight is play it completely stun immune. With APOC, you obviously cannot hit into her block and accidentally stun her, or you're going to take that damage back. Just, play completely stun immune, and it should be an easy solo. All right, next was a fight that I was very excited for. My hated nemesis, Domino. This was a solo with Omega Sentinel, who deleted Domino faster than a teenage boy clearing his browser history. So Omega's ability accuracy cannot be reduced by mutants, so she's not going to take any crit fail damage, and the only thing you really have to watch out for in this fight is Domino's evade. I had plasmas from the Special 2 ticking for like 6,000 damage per second. The fight was over very Mojo's up next. Look at that winning smile, you guys. This was a solo with Spider-Man 2099. This was actually the first time that I had ever used S99 in any meaningful content. So I was kind of learning how to play him on the fly. Used the Special 2 to get that Wither debuff up, mixed in some heavies and special ones here and there for extra debuffs, hit into his block a bunch whenever I could to get those ruptures applied, and then kept everything paused with dexes. Since you can't trigger buffs, you're basically immune from degen unless you do take a hit from the Special 2. The staggers from the node are going to keep you topped up health-wise, and I actually ended up finishing this fight with a full yellow bar too. Not bad for a first-timer. Okay, last fight in Section 3 was I-Bomb. This was a 1 revive fight with Omega Sentinel, and as has been a theme in this video, it should have been a solo, but I kept messing up the Special 1 dexes, and eventually it killed me. In hindsight, I think it's better to just block the roly-poly part of the Special 1, and then just dex out of the last hit and heavy counter to pause your debuffs. So Omega Sentinel, of course, is a robot, so she won't take poison damage, but she will get the poison debuffs applied to her. And this is important in this fight because it means that if you get too many of the poisons applied to you, they're going to get converted into an acid burn, and you are going to take massive amounts of damage and probably die. So don't ever push I-Bomb to his Special 2, or you're going to have a pretty bad time. Your regen should keep you topped up health-wise somewhat, but the disorients from the under pressure node are going to cause it to fail a lot of the time too, so just be aware of that. Again, definitely should have been a solo in this fight. When I was planning out my path, this was a fight where I almost brought someone else other than Omega Sentinel for. I was thinking Nimrod, I was thinking Scorpion. Shout out to my Discord though, I think it was Sugar who said that they used Omega Sentinel for this fight and had success with it, so I was happy to bring her along. First up on the final stretch is APOC. This was a solo with Omega Sentinel. Again, similar to the Domino fight, she is immune to AAR from mutants, so you don't have to worry about the electric fluctuations node. She's also not bleed immune, but she won't take any damage from them, so coolant leak isn't going to be an issue for you either. You can heavy counter APOC's special 2 to pause your debuffs if you need to, and if your Omega Sentinel is duped like mine is, she's going to apply extra plasmas to him with your special 2 because he has those permanent prowess passives too. This is basically just a normal Apocalypse fight if you're using Omega Sentinel. Okay, Sasquatch is next. This was my worst fight when I went through the content last year. This year I ended up getting the solo with Void. Very, very satisfying to do so. I actually think I'm going to upload this one separately, but Void counters every annoying part of this fight. He's going to shut off the Power Snack node, he's going to shut off Sassy's regen if you're running Max Despair, and Void is also, without a doubt, one of the best life cycle counters in the game. So with life cycle, the defender is immune to damage over time. You need to knock them down and kill them before that shield comes back, otherwise they're just going to keep regenerating. But with Void, he turns normal debuffs into dot, which circumvents the node. So what ends up happening is at the end of the fight, you knock Sasquatch down to disable his shield. The regen isn't going to trigger because Void has shut that off already, and then Sasquatch is going to immediately die from the degen. I know I preach a lot about Void, but man, this is arguably the hardest fight in this quest, and he makes it look almost trivial. Okay, next up was Killmonger. This was one revive with APOC. Again, could have been a solo. I messed up a special 1 dex about 2/3 of the way through the fight. APOC is going to build up the bleed immunity, but you will take a decent chunk of damage first, so you may want to have APOC healed up for your first go. Other than that, really nothing special going on here. Get that concussion up with your SP2 to turn off reverb, and then it's basically a normal Killmonger fight. Okay, moving close to the end, we have this Void with Power Shield and Long Distance Relationship. So I initially went in on this fight with APOC, hoping to destroy him with like a big special 2. I had even put on like mutant special boosts as well. That ended up not working out because Void was super mean, so I ended up just finishing him off with Hercules. Herc is really good for this fight. I mean, obviously, as long as you stay aggressive, you really don't have to worry about the degen at all. This fight was a huge roadblock for me last year because I was running Suicides with Corvus. If you don't have a solid counter to this fight, it will be extremely painful for you. Okay, last fight before the boss is Nick Fury. I actually really like this fight because with kinetic transference, it makes it a lot easier to push Nick to his special 2, which is really where you want him to be. So your strategy here should be to do a lot of 4-hit combos, hold block to force him not to throw that special 1, and then when he's at 2 bars of power, you can dex out of the blocked hits and just bait out that special attack. No revives for me on this fight. I went in with Hercules first, and then finished him off with Omega Sentinel. Omega Sentinel's heal block is very useful in this fight because he has the Vigor node, and if you time your heal block right, you can actually shut off his second life healing in the same way that you can with someone like Warlock or Penny Parker. It's really tough to do. You have to get that second medium in as soon as his first life is over, which prevents him from regenerating all the way up to 100%. If you do manage to pull it off, it's going to save you a bit of time for sure. Other than that, just force him to hold that special 1, and it really shouldn't be too bad. Last, but certainly not least, is the boss, Nameless Thanos. So you can cheese the crap out of this fight with Spider-Man 2099, and that was 50% of the reason why I brought him along on my team. So in this fight, Thanos' abilities are controlled by him using his special attacks. However, all of his power gain in this fight is passive. So with at least one Withered debuff up, Spider-Man completely shuts down the power gain and basically turns off every annoying aspect of this fight. The only thing you need to do is heavy spam him in the corner to get your exhaustion debuffs up. This is going to handle the power gain until you can toss your special 2 and place your Wither debuff on him. And from there, it's pretty much just rinse and repeat. Make sure to dex to pause the debuffs before you use your special 2. This fight actually cost me 4 team revives because I didn't properly heavy counter one of Thanos' heavies. He ended up killing me when he was in the final phase, and I had to play the last 30% or so normally, which was not a fun time. The AI in this fight sucks, especially in that final phase where you need him to attack into you so you can get an intercept before he instantly KOs you with a special 3. So many times he was just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for that power gain to build up, or he would just tap me once when I tried to intercept him. Really, really annoying. If you get stuck in that final phase, it's probably going to cost you some revives, so just be prepared for it. So all in all, I used 14 revives and 14 potions on this run. I was extremely pleased about that. I got 9 solos out of 21 fights. Probably should have had 3 or 4 more, but that's the way it goes sometimes. If I had to do this content again, I would probably use the exact same team. Everyone on the team was useful. I didn't get roadblock anywhere either, which was really nice. When this quest came out last year, I called it in my previous overview video the most well-balanced piece of content that Kabam had ever introduced, and I really stand by that still. It may even be like the best quest they've ever designed, if we're being honest. Like, it has that challenge level that you want in endgame content, but it's missing a lot of the BS, like the Labyrinth Evade or the Abyss Hit Cap. Just really, really well-designed content where the right team and the right skill level is going to get you through it for pretty cheap. That's going to do it for this overview. Please let me know in the comments below what team you used and how your run went. If this video helped you, please help me by hitting that like button and subscribing for future videos. And as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.